Um, Erin, I want to introduce my chat room ambassador for this morning or this afternoon. We actually will probably have two, but Erin Dissinger is here. In full disclosure, Erin and I are related. Her dad is my cousin, and I never know if it's second cousin or first cousin once removed.
You guys are first cousins, so we're first cousins once removed.
That's what it is. So we're first cousins once removed. And I am so proud that she is a fellow learning and development professional. Erin, what are you doing now before you go hide in the chat room? What are you doing now?
Right now, I just work part-time. I do independent contracting work for a small professional development firm called Fringe PD. And we do coaching, workshops, all sorts of L&D type of stuff for law firms across the country. So I basically do what I'm doing here for you right now. I put the materials together. I do all that stuff.
Nice.
And I'm in school for my MBA. So
that's right.
And looking for a full-time job if anybody's hiring.
Yeah, put it out there. Put it out there. Actually, I think Ginger Jarrett has a full-time job out there. I don't know if you have all the requirements for it, but you might take a peek at that's at I believe Olympus. So there you go, Ginger. There's a shout out for your job. There is a job opening. So welcome to Meet the Author. This Meet the Author we've been doing in September. It'll be 8 years. Crazy. So we used to meet at the Pyramid Club. Here comes Marjorie. She's my other chat room ambassador. Welcome, welcome, Marjorie. We've started the program. We'll let you take a second to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to get into my announcements. All right. I think you're on mute, my friend.
Hello.
Welcome, Marjorie. Tell us about yourself.
Well, hi, everybody. Gosh, I am currently a part-time learning manager for Philadelphia Gas Works. And I know Teresa from doing corporate training and stand-up comedy. And I'll be teaching storytelling this fall at Mount Airy Learning Tree.
Nice.
So that's all there is about me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. I actually reached out for volunteers and said I could use some chat room ambassadors, and Erin and Marjorie wrote back immediately. So I was thrilled because I'm like, these are two superstar chat room ambassadors. So thank you for joining us. We're going through the announcements. Once I get through the announcements, you guys can hide your screen, and I'm going to bring up our guest author for the day. So
okay, so right. You just want us to put those links in the chat now and then?
That's it. Our job. And Erin's got it. Erin's got it. So create some fun, Marjorie.
Oh, okay.
Create some fun. All right. So Meet the Author. It's on Philadelphia Business Journals. It's number 5 on their list of best networking in Philadelphia, despite the pandemic, which is crazy. So, but we used to meet in person at the Pyramid Club. Pandemic, we went to Zoom. Now that we're starting to come back to life, we are meeting at the Pyramid Club every so often. And I do want to let you know that October 25th, we have a women's author panel. I believe, yes, we have 6 that are now confirmed authors, all wonderful, all different topics. That will be in person at the Pyramid Club at 6 o'clock on October 25th, which is a Tuesday. And I just confirmed Nancy Barilli, who November 18th, it's a Friday. She was a punk back in the day, which resonates with me because I was a punk back in the day. I know it's hard to believe. It's crazy. I got pictures to prove it. I even went to England to hang out in Trafalgar Square with the punks. Anyway, Nancy wrote a book about being a punk in Philadelphia back in the 80s. She will be our guest that Friday night. Take us back. We're going to wear our spike bracelets. We're going to do all the cool things. It's going to be fun. So now we are ready to bring on our author, Erin and Marjorie. Thank you for joining us. Entertain the troops in the chat room. Is there anything I forgot? I didn't introduce myself.
Introduce yourself. Yeah.
I am Teresa Hummel-Krallinger. Thank you. I told Erin I never remember to introduce myself. So, and I have been hosting this for a long time, for about 8 years. My company is High Five Performance, and I work with organizations to create places where people want to work. So we work on organizational culture, leadership development, and how to get along better, interpersonal communications, teaming. Marjorie has seen me do my thing. Erin, I think you've seen me do my thing. I love my job. I can't believe I get paid for it. And at this point in time, there is such a need for creating healthy culture and reinventing our workplaces. So I am riding the wave, enjoying the work, cool stuff. And now I'm going to introduce our author. Thank you, Erin, for that reminder. So our author, I met unexpectedly. I was at an expo at a big conference. I want to say maybe it was ATD. I don't think it was Sherm, but I'm walking around and he has a booth and his book is Survival of the Savvy. And it is all about political savvy, which is so important. But I will tell you, as a training professional, there are very few resources out there. So it catches my eye. We have a conversation. I instantly love him. And I said, listen, I want to stay in touch. He said, we have a certification program. He certifies folks to teach this course. I signed up, went to New York, got the certification, and have taught the class. So wonderful, wonderful book. Well, here this year, he releases a new book, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get him on Meet the Author. So I reached out to Rick. He is on the West Coast, or he would clearly have been in person at the Pyramid Club. But he is going to join us today to talk about Straight Talk. Straight Talk, wonderful communications book. And I'm a snob about this stuff. Let me tell you, this is a really good book. For all of my training and OD folks that are on the call, you will want to buy this book. You may want to use this as a book conversation for the folks that work with you that could just use a little help in interpersonal communications. So please welcome to the screen, Dr. Rick Brandon.
Hello, everybody. Greetings. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. I want to high five you for high five performance, Teresa. It's great to be back. Yeah, we met. It was quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and I loved interacting with you. Yeah. And we had the certification time in New York with 10 other folks like you and who became my learning partners. And now we're reconnecting. So it's great to wind my way back to high five. I'm calling in from, for those of you who don't know, I live out here in Mill Valley, California. It's the land of hot tubs and giant redwood trees. So that's where I'm at, just over the Golden Gate Bridge into Marin County. So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted that you could join us, and I knew we'd find a way to work this out. So yeah. I'm fascinated because your that first book is just a gem. And then when I saw you come out with a second book, I'm thinking, what prompted you to write a second book? Not that you don't have a head full of knowledge and a life of really wonderful experience, but what prompted you to write this book?
Sure. Well, I've been into this communication thing since before I was born, literally, because I happen to be an identical twin. Can you believe God did this twice? So my twin and I were into communicating literally at a cellular level before we were even born. My family was really into communication. My dad was a super salesman. He ran a furniture store in the ghetto of St. Louis, Missouri, and I would watch him communicate. He was amazing. And then he'd be the guy that would stand up and MC weddings and bar mitzvahs and big birthdays. So he was really out there and loved working with groups and was a master communicator. So I was into communication all along. I thought I was going to become a therapist, and actually my PhD is in counseling. But I realized I didn't want to work one-on-one, and I didn't want to. It's important, but I didn't find myself resonating to working with people in their stuckness and kind of the whole psychology thing of finding labels and diagnosing people. One time a friend said, "Oh yeah, so you're one of those shrinks, huh?" And it bugged me.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not a shrink. I would rather be a stretch. So that got me into stretching people's boundaries by teaching communication skills. And I've been doing it for, 4 decades now, in a lot of different ways.
And working with a lot of great organizations along your travels.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I love doing it. And for the first 20 years of my life, I'll just show you a slide here that fits. First 20 years of my life, I was doing the core interpersonal skills that this book is about. I've been working on that for a long time. You met me when I had worked up the influence pyramid. And of course, we need all of these kinds of influences, communication, style, Myers-Briggs, you mentioned DISC,
Yeah.
that's style-based. And then you have presentation-based. There's great stuff out there for public speaking, whether it's in a big group or a small group. The survival of the savvy course that you were and book that you were talking about that was 18 years ago now is about strategic influence. And by that, it was all about navigating company politics and power dynamics, because the whole world isn't interpersonal skills.
No.
So that's what got me into that. Now I'm at a part of the reason to answer your question of why did I write it is it's always been part of me since birth, communication and interpersonal skills of listening and assertive speaking and getting good agreements with people. Why now? I returned to it for two reasons. One is the pandemic. I wrote it during the COVID. I needed something to do, right? And
You made good use of
during
the time.
COVID, yeah, but I also seriously felt like it's a time where we're all so disconnected.
Yeah.
And the pandemic led to feeling people even more alienated than ever before, depersonalized. And the actual data is that 1 in 5 adults feel lonely, and loneliness is exacerbated during COVID. So that's what prompted me to do it now. And I also am at a point in my career where it felt right after 40 years of teaching this stuff in different formats to put it out there, just to make it available. We have workshops, but I don't care if someone can't take the book. Let's make the available. Can't take the workshop. Let's make it available to them. So that's where I'm coming from, is to just put the workshop that I've been doing into a book and making it available, especially during COVID. How's my clarity? Am I making sense or blabbing too much here?
No, you're making sense. Every now and then there's like a little zoomy, like a little hiccup, but we can still hear you well. It's good, but it's very minimal, very minimal.
Is it, Teresa, is it just on my audio or is it my video too?
It's kind of the combo that, you know how you hear like that little, but it's not often. So don't worry about it. If it gets crazy, I'll let you know.
Can you give me 5 seconds? I'm going to go open one door, and meanwhile, everybody can look at this.
Oh, there you go. And meanwhile, I'll share with you guys. So Rick was just talking about how he wrote the book and hoping that people would buy it and use it. And it's a workshop in a book. So when we were talking about his book, because I'm a training professional, I am always looking for resources for my audience. One of the things you might consider in your organization is buying this book. You can actually buy it in bulk. And I know Aaron's going to share the link with the email address, and do this as part of your book group. Maybe you give assignments like, hey, read a few chapters. Let's talk about it. How do we put this into play here in our organization? Why don't we have a little practice here? Because it truly is a workshop in a book. Well, welcome back from your I have another. Any
better?
It is.
Great.
It is.
Had a door closed that was blocking the modem. So sorry about that, folks.
That's all right. Well, my next question, and this is coming from the heart, because I am all about this good communications, and people, if you can master this, you're going to be more successful, not just in work, but in life. So you claim that this interpersonal influence, it's not a soft skill. And frankly, I struggle with it when people call it a soft skill. It gives them a competitive advantage. From your perspective, why?
Well, yeah, I hear you. Soft skill. Don't we all in the profession hate that term?
I don't like it.
It discounts
it's a hard skill. It's not
I like
easy.
Amen, sister. I like to say this isn't a soft skill. It's not, oh, great, they're sending me to charm school. No, this is about hard skills. They're deceptively difficult to put into practice, especially when the stress is high, and they achieve hard results. They do give the individual a competitive advantage, but they also give the companies or agencies, if you're a government agency or nonprofit, a competitive advantage. Just want to run through why that might be. First off, what happens when people don't use the soft skills, don't use communication
It
skills?
gets ugly.
Well, you're talking missed deadlines, misunderstanding. The cost is in the billions they've estimated of listening errors. You've got people, morale suffers, teamwork suffers, wasted time, dollars are lost, but especially if it becomes toxic communication, not just faulty, but toxic, well, now people are going to quit and leave. Number one reason people Gallup found that's why they leave is my manager. The communication around here is awful. They quit and leave. They go to the next company where it's just as bad, or worse, they quit and stay. They stick around physically, but they're gone emotionally and mentally, and it drains they're upset about faulty communication. It drains their time and energy and their results while they're whining about it at the water cooler. So obviously there's some more impacts here, but what is that your experience, Teresa, that at work and at home, that it's not the task problems that are stress us, it's the people problems? What's your take?
It's definitely the communication skills. And frankly, Rick, this is why I feel you and I will have work for the rest of our lives. I hope we can live long enough to do the amount of work that is needed, because what I find is we have a lot of really smart people that we work with. I have an organization with engineers, brilliant, beyond my wildest dreams, biostatisticians, pharmacologists, systems developers, just so smart. And you know what they struggle with? The conversation. They struggle. And you talked about earlier being stuck. This is what happens. Folks get stuck. And the only way out of being stuck, and I tell them this, is a conversation. There needs to be a conversation. And they're like, oh, anything but that. Please, can I do it in Excel? No.
Yeah. Well, some people do. Some people rate especially the tough conversations, which we'll talk about later on, perhaps. They rate it right up there with walking on crushed glass, right? It's difficult, especially if I'm an engineer. I'm a highly technical person. So this is critical to create the bonds, not just for touchy-feely reasons, for bottom line competitive advantage. Because think about it. What the book is talking about, what the workshop is talking about, the ones that you and I do, it's about productivity, because it's about using listening and assertive speaking to make clear commitments, clear agreements, because otherwise all we've got is compliance and people aren't really into it. So how do we get the clear agreement up front? How do we hold people accountable through constructive conversations? How do we keep engagement high? Engagement atrophies when the communication isn't there. And you and I know Gallup found, what was it, something like
barely 30%.
Yeah, 30% of people are fully engaged. And the number one reason is lousy communication and lack of positive recognition. So, and there's some interesting material on people quitting and leaving that from SHRM, that in 2021, 3.5 million people per year were quitting and leaving. Now in 2022, they estimate 4.5 million per month. So that's kind of hard to believe, but these are SHRM's number, Society of Human Resources. Have you heard that at all? That level of dysfunction?
It is definitely much higher than it used to be. And part of it I attribute to folks had time over the last couple years to ponder, to think. Because when we're in the office, if I'm honest with you, there's a lot, like you're busy, there's distractions, even if you're not in a meeting, there's people stopping in, but when you work from home, when you have that kind of blank space between the meetings, you have a lot of time to ponder. And I think people started to think about, I don't want to be unhappy at work. I don't want, and so they're looking for more. Rick, I'm watching people quit and not have another job lined up.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm like, wow, holy cow.
Well, and sounds like you're tapping in also to the fact that if they are in a job or they aren't, they're sitting and maybe they're simmering Maybe they're
Yeah.
sitting and simmering. So we have alienation, we have depersonalization, we've got remote work adding to the sense of distance and lack of connectedness. And we have that loneliness I mentioned. And if there's something that's gone south, they have more time to think about it and become bummed out about it, and it's hurtful. So how can we get the engagement percolating again? It's not everything. There are financial issues and other geography, other issues, and a huge factor has been found, the research shows, to be a lack of engagement, and a big part of the lack of engagement problem is faulty communication. We're not mending it, and lack of recognition. What about supervisors? This isn't soft skills. A supervisor's promoted because of his technical expertise or the results he gets. Now he's promoted not for his own results, but the results he gets with and through other people. And he's in a quandary. He or she is saying, how do I coach my people? How do I manage the people who used to be my pals and we used to whine about the manager and talk to? Now I'm the man, you know. So these skills help them make agreements, help them give feedback, help them coach, help them to resolve conflict, help them listen and counsel people who are in pain and come to them with a work problem about a customer or work associate, a decision they're trying to make. As supervisors and executives, we need this. And we all have heard of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence, where he found executives, the higher you go in a company, the more important the emotional intelligence is. And the last reason it's a competitive edge, of course, is innovation. Innovation atrophies when people are in fear, when they're passive and submissive, and we're teaching people to let go of that, not be aggressive. Maybe they're afraid of the aggressive people. How do we assert our ideas? And innovation will atrophy if it's not there. Because free flow of communication is important versus stifling myself for fear. And how do I say my idea without it getting knocked down? So there's 1,000,001 reasons why communication is not soft skills. I hope I didn't overload there. What do you think?
No, it's all good stuff. And of course, I'm thinking of all my situations and stories and examples that I've seen along my travels. And I think to myself, if an organization really focused on giving everybody, now, if we're only going to give some, certainly people managers and above, they are required to have this. But wouldn't it be a gift to give everybody in the organization these tools? Because you know what, Rick, if I'm honest with you, you were lucky. Your dad, it sounds like he was a great communicator. So you had a good role model. Many of us didn't have the role models at home, didn't really have influencers where we saw them demonstrating good conflict management, good dialogue skills. So we just kind of stumble along and skin our knees and make our way. So if an organization would, it's a gift to provide folks with these skills, not just for work, so they can have relationships with their spouse, right? With oh my gosh, with their kids, oh my teenage years, how to have, tough stuff.
Yeah, you just remind me of a recent workshop, actually a couple of years ago, but I'm reminded of it recently because I just wrote it in the book, the end of one of the chapters, and it reminded me, oh my God. We do a course, the day on listening. The guy goes home. I mean, he's a big, strong Marine. Think Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he was a little resistant the first day. You know, this is a little, you know, this isn't the guy's thing. It's a little not macho to be paraphrasing and empathizing with the feelings. It was too touchy-feely for him. He comes back the next morning and he comes strolling up to me and I'm freaking out. Oh my God. What? He comes up and his eyes glisten. He's got a tear in his eye and says, Rick, I want to thank you. This helped me at home last night. My teenage daughter never talks to me. She came in and for once I started listening and we talked for an hour about some problems she was having at school. And she kissed me goodnight and said, her name was Katie. I'm starting to cry thinking about it. He said, Dad, thank you. We need to do more of this. And so he said, thank you, Rick. So I think it is at work, it is at home. And back to what you said before, there's a lot of companies we work with will be in work forever because there are a lot of companies in pain due to faulty communication. Right. But I want to say that this book and the workshop and the work you and I do, and a lot of us on the call here, it's not just when when the person needs to fix it. It's not just for remedial or the company. We don't have to be sick physically in order to get even healthier. And that's true for communication skills. So it's partly developmental and partly preventive. And then sure, it helps people with their biggest communication problems too. So I just I say amen to what you're saying. It's work and personal when we're well and when we're not well in terms of our communication.
Yeah, super, super important. Well, I was wondering if you would take us, give us a little peek under the hood. I know there's a model, the Straight Talk model. Do you, and I always ask, can you give us a nugget? Share the model with us if you can.
Sure. Yeah, here's what we'd start right at the start of the book. We start with your attitudes and your feelings about workplace communication. So we call that the Straight Talk mindset, FIT. We need to understand and foster the business goals, like I just shared with you. Then we identify, well, what are your patterns? Are you typically assertive, or are you sometimes aggressive or borderline aggressive? Little too harsh, or borderline passive and submissive, or actually submissive, and we're wimping out on having the tough conversation or stating our idea. And then the T stands for Take the Straight Talk Challenge. We challenge people, and there's a lot of activities in the book and in the workshop that gets them involved to realize what their patterns are and to make a commitment to being part of the solution about workplace communication, rather than part of the problem. So that's the FIT. We work on that first. So chapter 2, after we talk about the needs, chapter 2. Chapter 3 is assertive speaking. The ABCs, love my acronyms, FIT, ABC. It's the building blocks. Assertive speaking, and all of our body language and our voice and the words we use, behavioral language, bias-free language that's objective rather than using dysfunctional language, and then checking reactions. Once we check reactions, we have to actively listen and listen through. It costs us something to listen is the idea. It costs our time, our energy, our agenda, our turn. And so we have to invest a fee, FEE, focusing skills. It's the body language and attending. Exploring skills, asking those open questions, the following skills. I see, really, no kidding, tell me more. And empathizing skills through validating what they're saying where you do agree, and I don't blame you for feeling upset about it, I would too. But more importantly, empathizing by paraphrasing the thoughts and feelings of the other person in your own word, not parroting, not mimicking, but paraphrasing. Let me see if I understand what you're saying, Teresa. You're really upset because blah, blah, blah. So then those are the core skills, and then we start plugging them into conversations, like you said.
Yeah.
Smooth sailing conversations, and then later on, rough sailing conversations. So all of this is covered in the book. These kinds of conversations of advising and guiding people if they come to you with a problem, of forging those upfront agreements about what you need from people, whether or not you manage the person. We need it with my boss. I need it with my clients. We had agreements about how we were going to do this webinar, this session, recognizing people when they do keep the agreements and appreciating other things that have nothing to do with commitments, but they're really helping you in terms of your time, your stress, your results, the teamwork. And then of course we have the rough sailing ones that people rate up there with yuck, with whatever your least favorite food is or medicine is, challenging ideas, disagreeing, reminding people if they have dropped the ball on a commitment and doing it in a way that gets them back on board, not overly blameful. And yet there are times where we do need to come to them, and it's you and me reckoning time. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't hold you accountable. Here's the problem. And it might be a broken agreement, and it might be just something out of the blue you do that's so egregious. I need to confront you and hold you accountable for that and bring you around. So that's the model. And it helps to have that cognitive map of where we're at. And every one of these pieces of the model, there's chapters on in the book, a chapter on in the book.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I think it's not just helping people with the words they say. I think people focus so much on that, but the how you say it, the pausing, the paraphrasing, the listening, right? What do you see? Are there common mistakes that people make along the way with communication? Do you see some typical mistakes that people make that this book will help them with?
Yeah, I went and I think there's a mistake corrected on every page, I hope. But the big picture would be people know what listening is. People know that they need to make an agreement, but there are typical mistakes with listening, typical mistakes with forging commitments. Which do you want to hear me riff on? Anyone, either of those grab you?
They're both important to me, but yeah, I want to hear about forging agreements. I don't think people I love the fact that you paired that out and made that a focus, because once you do, you see that's an important component of our relationship.
Yeah.
So let's talk about forging
Sure.
agreements and where people might have a misstep.
You betcha. You betcha. I think there's three. I'm so glad I had three fingers up, because I'm the kind. So I've had times where I said there are three problems with. That's why I'm in the people business, not mathematics. I think there's three kinds of people in the world: people who can count and people who can't count. Right? Oops. So there are three faulty expectations about agreements and commitments that get us into trouble. So the first faulty expectation is we don't make them enough. Like you said, we have to realize.
Yes.
So that this is part of our relationship, and it's what brings us to be more assertive through our agreements. And that's how we draw our boundaries and lines. And what people do is we sometimes the faulty expectation is we expect people to be mind readers. Think about it, and I'll ask you to listen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Hey, you should know that this bothers me, Teresa, when you do this. So I don't put my mouth in motion and let sound come out. I think that I'm thinking it, or I send an email, which is one way. It's not a conversation. It's one way. It's command and control. So we're talking agreements and commitments that are two-way, overt, explicit, that work through the concerns you might have. It's a dialogue, not a monologue or a duologue, right? So that's the first one, is to ask yourself, I'm upset with this person for not doing what I want them to do, or I'm upset with them for doing something I want them to stop doing, or I'm upset with them for doing something in the wrong way. And my question to your listeners, hello everyone, have you really had the upfront two-way commitment-oriented conversation, or is it just in your mind that we're expecting them? They should know it's part of their job, right, Teresa?
Right.
Well, it
Right.
might be part of their job, and maybe they should know to do it this way, but their behavior is saying they don't. So do you want to confront them right away? No, let's pull back and go up to them and acknowledge that we need to make this agreement. So that's faulty. It's not making enough. Faulty expectation. Second one, expecting ineffective conversations, agreement and commitment conversations, to lead to effective results. So what we teach people is to know what the agreement content needs to be. And that model is called the GAIN model. If I want to gain commitment from you, I want to talk about the goals, be specific, use that behavioral language I mentioned before. And so I need you to be more of a team player. That's not behavioral. What does team player mean to you versus someone else? So that's another mistake people make, is they don't define what they want in a way that a camera would see. What would a camera see that constitutes team behavior? Because you might be thinking, well, I come to the meetings on time, I participate. Well, maybe that's part of teamwork, but what I really want is, in addition to that, hypothetically, with our new salespeople, I want you to share information about how you sell, and about clients that have gone from used to be your clients that are their clients now. I want you to coach them on how to work with this, and this client. That's what I mean by being team oriented. So I want to tell you the goals that I have, and I want to tell you why. Oftentimes, especially parents,
Yes.
bedtime.
Here's the
Nope,
why.
it's bedtime. Go ahead. Go. Why? What's in it for you?
Yep.
Why do I want you to do it? How's it help the team, the company, the public? And so it's a sell. It's an influence skill. So I want to influence you. And then here's what a lot of managers leave out. No, it's their job to do it. I'm going to just tell them, even if I talk to them, I might have the conversation, but leave this question out. Teresa, what's going to stand in the way of you buying into and feeling good about the commitment I'm asking you to make?
Yeah.
I ask you, I want you. A lot of people say, whoa, why are you giving them excuses? You're doing the opposite. You're taking the excuse away. And then finally, of course, we summarize. I don't summarize the agreement. I ask you, the other person, just to make sure that we're on the same page. What's your understanding of the agreement we're making here? So that's the content. And the last thing I'll say is the faulty agreement, faulty process that won't lead to effective results is bad news. If I don't speak, check your reaction and paraphrase what your reaction and use that cycle. It's called the dialogue cycle. So we have faulty expectations of expecting people to be mind readers. We have expecting good results from ineffective conversations at a content or process level, communication level. The third and last one is expecting without inspecting.
Yeah.
We have to inspect what we expected, and after the agreement, remind them if they dropped the ball, one of those skills, chapter 8. And we want to give positive recognition, chapter 7, if they are keeping the agreement, because that's what really motivates them. And that's what's missing a lot, is we don't follow up. If it's not important enough for me to follow up the commitment, it probably won't be important enough for you to even keep it.
Yeah.
So how's my clarity on here? That's kind of some of the nuggets on at least the speaking part and the making agreements piece.
You got the wheels turning there. You got the wheels turning. Well, I had a conversation with a client yesterday. Every company is going through this, but this company really has a significant amount of change. And he was looking for tips on how best to communicate change. And I have this whole change management worksheet. It's probably, I don't know, I probably put it together in the 80s. That's how, I mean, like I've been doing it that long. But I like that model for communicating change, right? So like, this is what is planned. This is what the ultimate goal is, right? Now let's talk about the why. What are the advantages? Why are we doing this? What might get in the way? And now the thing that I always weave in is, what are we losing? Let's talk about what we're losing. So this isn't a change management model, but this is a nice, tight, even if they just did these 4 things from a change management perspective, this is a whole thing to follow.
So you're seeing potential for this model instead of just thinking of what's the task level change.
Yeah.
You're saying we got to manage the human side of change. Yeah. We have to have the conversation, because in times of change, that's when people under communicate, because things they're scurrying. If anything, they should make the mistake of over communicating by going through this process. I think it's a great one. And I love what you just said about not just saying what's in it for you in the advantages, but asking what could stand in the way, including you want to know their resistance.
Yeah.
What do you feel? Because in times of change, people resist. They're afraid there's a perceived loss or threat to something.
Every time. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. But I think if organizations would take the time, even just to think through a change management communication that is people focused, that in itself is a bonus, because many times I just see, and here's the change. Yeah. And you're like, what is that? So just having some thought process before implementing the change around communication, but 2, having some kind of model that walks you through what are the most important components of that communication. At the very basics, these are them. This is it.
I love what you're saying, because the top management teams will bring in the consultants, bring in McKinsey or whoever, communication strategy, rather change strategy people, and they spend hours and days planning the content of the change. But you're saying we got to plan the communication, the human part of the change, and map out and give tools for them and skills for them to work with it, especially at the resistance level. Invite the resistance, because then it doesn't go underground, because it's still there anyway, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Think about even before you start communicating as a leader or the person who is running this change initiative, start to think about what are the things that people will push back on? What are the questions that they'll have? I have an organization just about to put in a new compensation system. And we started out with, I think we started out with 7 questions off the top of our head. Well, they're going to ask this, this, and this. Rick, by the time we had time to like ponder and go on our travels, we had 28 questions. We had 20. So just the exercise of what might people push back on? What might people question?
Yeah.
And not like just in a meeting for 5 minutes. I mean, like, take some time.
Lean into it, you're saying.
Lean into it.
Lean into it.
And you're going to come up with good stuff.
So that's resistance management. Don't be upset or thrown if they bring up some of those questions. Expect it and invite it, because otherwise they're not wrestling with it. They're just going through, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's not true commitment. That's
No.
compliance.
Bring it
You
on.
want- Yeah.
Bring it on. We had a feeling you were going to ask that question. Or, holy cow, that's a question we didn't think of, and good for you because we had 28. Like,
And
be transparent.
yeah, and even say, here, you didn't bring up this concern. Is this a concern? Or some people have wrestled with this. Don't make it a surprise. Again, back to that participant who says, wait, why are you going to tell them an excuse? Because it's building cooperation, it's building buy-in, it's building trust, and it's part of me holding on to my integrity of not setting them up, of being honest about the challenges that you will find. And then, of course, your influence on why it's worth those advantages, of why it's worth moving through it and working cooperatively towards a win-win solution. I call that mutual benefit problem solving. That's covered in the book. If you hit a roadblock and it seems like an irreconcilable difference, how do we listen well enough and long enough to get under that, the layers of their concern, to hear the real issue? Because they might not say it at the start. They might not trust us to hear it. They might not even be fully aware of it or only dimly aware of it. So I want to use active listening skills, that paraphrasing skill that we all have heard about, but don't always do it skillfully because there's mistakes with that. We want to unpeel the artichoke leaves to get from the outer issues that they might bring up to the deeper heart, the heart of what they're upset. And it's probably about loss. It's probably about fear.
Yep.
It's probably about threat. It's probably about sacrifice. So we want to get there and get, as we say, I want to get real. Right? We want to get real with the person. You used the word before. It's authenticity. Bingo.
It is. So this is an off-topic question, but you're making me think now, because you work with a lot of leaders and a lot of managers. Do they want to get real? Do they want to be authentic? What's your experience? What are you seeing?
Which individual are we talking about?
Yeah.
Of course, there's a whole range. There's a whole range of folks. But I find that once we open the door, if they don't want to get real, it's because they've been burned.
Yeah.
The culture doesn't support it.
Yep.
You just do your job. It's not about feelings. You should FedEx your brain to work, leave the rest at home. Okay. So it might be the culture, it might be their upbringing, it might be this is a little passé, but I do think that there to some extent but not as much as it used to be, gender differences. So it's a sex role stereotype. Men aren't into their feelings and talking about their feelings, and what's really women tend to be more. I think that's, thank God, is more passé these days. So it might be gender, it might be personality based. Some people are more extroverted, introverts. So it's partly culture, it's partly upbringing, partly modeling or lack of it. It's partly personality style, it's partly gender. And of course, that brings us back to what can the organization do to communicate that communication's important. I just read, that makes me think of, I think about 2 months ago, Elon Musk came out with an article, it came on LinkedIn, I think it was, that he wants to get rid of channels of communication at Tesla. Whatever else you might think of Elon Musk, he was saying, sure, the typical thing is you have to go through to your boss, then et cetera. He says, if you need to say something to someone, the doors are open at every level. That's kind of interesting. So that's an extreme of trying to build a communication-driven culture. But in other ways, what can we? That it's okay to talk about, not to spend 3 hours talking about your personal problems, but I want to know your personal feelings about the change, et cetera. So how can we really hear people's real feelings and reactions and upset or concerns about something I'm asking them to do? That's kind of how we got onto this.
Yeah. And there's a reason he's saying that. I mean, he is seeing the issues that communication blocks in the organization are having for ultimately his, not that he's not successful, but getting things successfully done.
Yeah. So that's him. We talked about, what's your take on the answer to your own question? What, people who don't, do you see differences?
Yes.
And what's that about? What's percolating for them?
And I think it runs the gamut. I think one of the things you said that was key is there a culture that supports real talk? Right.
Yeah.
But even in a culture
Straight talk.
Great. Even in a culture that doesn't, or like you just feel like for the most part, things are held close to the vest. It's shared when other people feel it's time to be shared. You as a manager have your own little world that you run, and you be authentic. You be authentic. And this is what I tell, because very often people be like, yeah, but I do leaders. And I'm like, I get it. And are you going to change them? No, you're not. But you know what? You have a staff of 8, 12 people who look to you for guidance, authenticity, truth, reality. Like, you run your shop the way you wish the rest of the world ran it. Just you be, hey, I don't have an answer to that question, but thank you for asking it. I'm writing it down because I'm going to follow on that. We go to meetings and I'm going to say, here's a question. What's the answer to this? I'll get you.
Yeah. You're inviting all of us to realize, just like in a relationship, I can only control my half of the relationship. I can't make you be authentic and real and empathic and clear and assertive. I can only be who I am, and which will hopefully invite that from you. And your point is, that's all. Whole organization or company, but when my doors close and we're having that meeting, I'm going to behave in a way that models that kind of people-oriented, inviting, straight talk, engendering, empathy, germinating way of being. And hopefully my people will do that, at least with each other. And maybe, who knows, maybe, I like to say, culture change happens one person at a time. We got to have a culture change. Well, how does that happen? It happens one person at a time.
It does. It's so true. And you just need to own your behavior, I hate to use the word brand. It's starting to get a little trite now, but it's an important part of making things happen, getting buy-in and trust and all of that. So yeah.
It goes back to what we said before with the straight talk mindset, FIT, foster the business goals by knowing them and talking about them, identify your patterns, take the straight talk challenge to be part of the communication solution rather than part of the faulty communication problem. It goes right, what you're saying goes right back to that take the challenge. Whether you call it straight talk or whether you call it positive communication, whether you
being real,
starts at home, huh?
It's awesome. I see Lisa put a question out here. So Lisa asked, does the book discuss the wacko factor when you try to reason with someone who is a wacko? What are your thoughts, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, that's dealing with difficult people. It's not a book on psychotherapy or conversion experience.
No, they may need it.
Electroshock. So sure, there are people, if they're so wacko, and you mean that like for real, Lisa, those are skill sets that obviously belong to trained psychologists and psychiatrists and those kinds of folks. But I would say that said, the chapters on handling defensive people and confronting people will go wacko in that moment, even if they're not really emotionally disturbed. You and I will go wacko. There are times where we get defensive. We know the other person's right. We know that we messed up, but don't we all get, there's a natural reaction to push back. And so I would reframe that question, Lisa, as does the book cover how to deal with those wacko situations where people start screaming when you confront them or give them corrective feedback? They start crying out of the blue. They blame other people. They
Yeah.
blame you. They threaten a lawsuit, sexual discrimination, and or they do, what can they do? They're trying to push your button and they can go wacko. And here's why, Lisa and everyone, because defensiveness isn't about the content. People say, well, she's wacko. She's lying to me. We did have the agreement. Why are you saying, what do you mean you don't remember we had it? It was on April 9th, you know. So we start to get upset ourselves and they push back. So we push and now it escalates. So what goes on is I invite people in the book and there are demonstrations of dealing with crying, screaming, stomping out of the room, threatening. The process that we teach helps people hear the defensiveness and understand it's not about the literal truth. Because at that moment, the pipes are clogged with emotion because they feel threatened. And when people feel threatened, they do get a little wacko. Let me just show you this quick definition of defensiveness. It's not about literal truth. It's about understanding. You're not a psychologist, but you want to understand the psychological truth. When that person says something that's crazy, Lisa and other friends, it's really just it's a natural response to push back, and it's not about logic. It's a physiological, it's about emotions. The pipes are going, and the reason the pipes are clogged with emotions, they might not have even heard the content of what you said, because it's all this emotion they have because they feel threatened. The same as what we said with change. This defensive reaction, and wacko as it can seem, for the most part, often it is just an emotional reaction and crazy making words that even they know isn't true, but it's to protect themselves from perceived threat, attack, or loss of ego. You know, I have to admit, I really blew it, you know. So we do get defensive. The only way to deal with it, the book teaches a million and one ways. How do you use the act of listening and assertive speaking together to listen down that person, not to fight back right away? You are going to come back and say, actually, we did talk about it. Here are my notes from April 9th when we talked about it. So maybe you don't recall that. So I'm going to help you recall. When you agreed that you would do such and such, and then you didn't, as happened with Mrs. Jones today on the phone, I do get upset because it means it jeopardizes our reputation and she takes her business elsewhere. So but that's my speaking term, but I first earned the right to speak by managing my self-talk and saying, wait a minute, she's not lying. She's just being human. She's being human and she's afraid. She's feeling defensive. The only thing I can do is unclog the pipes with active listening. I call active listening interpersonal Drano. We're going to unclog the pipes, right? So I hope that's helpful for Lisa. If you have a follow-up question, I'm glad to address it.
Oh, I'm looking at the chat to see if there's any comments. So Aaron and Marjorie are posting some links out there for folks who want to follow up, connect with Rick. One of the things Rick and I talked about, and it is 12:55, so I know we need to wrap up soon, is as a follow-up, what would you like from this? And I know you have trained trainers who will come to organizations and actually facilitate workshops on this, but you also created this book like a workshop in a book. So is your intention, because here's my intention, I'm just going to put it right out there, Rick. Very often we do book groups with clients. My intention is maybe I want to buy a bunch of books, share it with a group and say, let's go through this. Let's go through this.
Yeah.
So what would you like us to do as a follow-up?
A couple of things. One is, sure, as I said at the start, I wrote the book because these days I want to put it out there, whether or not people have my company come in to train or train the company's trainers, by the way, too. But if you're an independent consultant or you're a training manager in the company, get the book for sure. And then the book is the workshop in a book with activities and all of it comes from the Leader's Guide script. So you'll be able to be me, God forbid, and teach the piece. And then you run the practices. Maybe you assign chapter 2 and 3 and then they come, you talk about the book, but then you actually can coach and use the listening skills. If you would like, you can go to the website, brandonpartners.com, and you'll see / straight talk book, or you can click on the top books, and there you will even be able to download, you can order the book, of course, from Amazon, but you can download the exercise journal and the assessment.
Oh, nice.
So the exercise journal is a fillable PDF where they can write in the answers to how would they paraphrase this vignette. The other thing I would love it if people would do is get my email. It's there in the chat, Rick, my first name, at brandonpartners.com. We have, if you are someone that wants to do what Teresa just said, get a hunk of the books for your team or your division. I do have volume discounts, significant ones, and I sign the books, driving up the dollar value exponentially. And depending on the number of books you order, I actually do webinars and freebie conversations with your people after they read it. So either go to the book, to Amazon, order from me directly in bulk, or just grab it in your bookstore and teach the course. Rip me off, I beg you. Making the world safe.
It's noble. It is noble of you. Well, I am delighted that I ran into you at that expo. It was just very, very lucky. I include you in my group of trusted friends and thought leaders. I'm honored that you joined us at Meet the Author. And Rick, thank you. I can't thank you enough for giving us some time.
High five.
High five. And
High five
reconnecting.
performance. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Hope it was helpful and at least a little edutaining too.
I'm going to stop our recording.